He's handled some of the most high-profile cases in the area. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on public service and running for public office. And we're visiting with Ralph Wilson, the former solicitor of the 15th Judicial Circuit. Good morning, Ralph.
Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming in. I'm doing great. And of course, I thought about introducing you as the Honorable Ralph Wilson, but I think you were going to correct me.
Yes, I'm Ralph Wilson. I was Ralph Wilson before I became solicitor, and I'm still Ralph Wilson. But thank you.
Absolutely, very definitely. Of course, to think back, that's a little more than a decade when you first, was that the first time? No, you had the service on the Conway City Council.
I was in Conway. I started out actually with my career. Once I graduated from law school, I moved back here to Conway to live, and I've never left. I love this area. I love Horry County. I wouldn't live anyplace else. Once I got back here, I got on the city council. I think that was probably 80 or 81, and I served, I think, 2 terms on Conway City Council. And I enjoyed that. I really did. Being a part of the community and actually being able to help people and give back, you know, something to the community for all that had been given to me. So I really enjoyed my time with Conway.
And you grew up in Conway?
I grew up in Conway. Was born and raised here. I have 8 sisters and brothers, and, you know, I tell everybody, all my sisters and brothers are still here. You can't run us off.
No.
I mean, we all love it. And my mom is living, and she lives here in Conway. So, and my claim to fame is that every day at 6:30 or 6 or 7 o'clock, all 8 of us usually gather over at her house. So
oh, no.
It's a family thing. We do it. We've always done that. And in the summer, we all get together almost every day and do things. It's just, I have a very close family, and I'm very proud of them.
Well, I hate that today, right now at 7 a.m., we had to pull you away to get over here to the studio. I hope your mother will be forgiving.
Oh, she will. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Your brothers and sisters may not be. I may be getting some calls. That's right. How did you pull Ralph out? That experience, of course, I thought your claim to fame was you were married to Jennifer.
Well, that's her claim to fame. That's not my claim to fame. My claim to fame is that she is my wife, but and it's amazing because Jennifer is a very wonderful individual in her own right, and an excellent lawyer and an excellent judge. So I'm very proud to be married to her.
We loved getting her in on Monday. Obviously, she was with us on Monday, and she'd been with us a little more than a month ago in her role as co-chair of the 11th Annual American Heart Ball, which I'm sure you know broke 310,000, the biggest ever. And I think I saw you'd served on the local Heart Association board for a number of years.
I'd served on the board for a number of years when I was solicitor and when I was the deputy solicitor. After I left, then Jennifer got interested, and then she got involved in it. And it's just something that we feel very strongly about. We think that the Heart Association does a wonderful job, and they help so many people. And it's just good to be a part of something that gives back that much.
Ralph, she shared with us that you all have a good friend or had a good friend in Columbia. Recently had a stroke or had a heart attack out jogging.
Yeah.
And that friends of all ages in the mid-40s, 50s, so many folks are affected by heart disease and stroke.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible, when you think about that. It was so important. One of the things that Jennifer talked about as we wrapped up the interview back in January was focusing on Black History Month. And of course, she ended the month on Monday, on February 28th. As we roll into the month, there's so many aspects, of course, about having grown up Black, having grown up in the South Black, and having recognized those roots. And of course, the opportunity to get you in, having served as an elected official, having run and been successfully elected in Horry and Georgetown County, in 2 counties, geographically the 1st and 4th largest counties in the state. It's a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I ran for office on multiple occasions, both for city council. I had 2 elections in Conway City Council, and those were at-large elections.
Right.
And Conway is predominantly white, probably 70-30, and the county is even greater than that. Horry County is probably more 80-20 or
That's right.
around. And but you know, over the years, what I've learned is that people judge you based on your character and based on your presentation to them. And that's certainly been my experience. Now, as I grew up in this county, things were different. Things have really changed in this county over the last 15, 20, 25 years. Now, I can look back to where I started out, and I can remember times when I was growing up that my mom and I would go to clean up an office that she used to work at, which was downtown Conway, and I can remember the signs, with the water coolers saying colored only, and the window for the bakery where you get the donuts that said colored only, and you had to go to the window. You couldn't go to the inside, and you certainly couldn't sit down at the tables. I remember those things. I remember the pharmacy that had the tables in. And then this would have been in the early 60s, and because they didn't want black people to sit at the tables, and the government had said at that point that they had to open up the restaurants, then they took all the tables out, and because they didn't want black people to sit down. I remember all those things. Those are dull memories, but I try to remind my kids and other kids of how it used to be. Things are very, very different now. There's the testament to that is you look at the fact that I grew up during that era, yet I was the first black person ever in this state elected as a prosecutor in the state of South Carolina since Reconstruction. Never has happened before, has not happened since. And it happened in the same county where those water coolers were and where those colored only signs were hanging. So what that says to me is that people have gotten past that. People now are willing to look at what you can do and your ability and your character and not just your color. And that's so very, very important because the only thing that I believe that anybody's entitled to is a fair chance, an equal opportunity to do and to show what they can do. And I think that in Horry County, we have now reached that level. Is it perfect? No. But I think it's better than most places.
Those words are indicative. I mean, strong words that come out of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Isn't that correct? To be
absolutely.
Judged by the content of one's character rather than by the color of their skin.
Absolutely. It's the dream, and I have to admit, I've probably lived as much of the dream as anybody. Growing up here, having grown up the way that I did, coming from humble beginnings, I was the son of a laborer, blue-collar laborer, a mother who had a 6th grade education, and yet I was able to go to college, to go to law school, to come back, to be the first elected black prosecutor in the state of South Carolina, in the history of the state of South Carolina. And then not only was I elected, but then I was reelected.
That's right.
I was elected at large on 2 separate occasions in the city of Conway. I mean, that's a testament to the character of the community, not just to me. And it says that people have come a long way and that they are willing, if you work hard, if you do the right things, if you carry yourself in the manner that allow you to be a public official, that they will vote for you, that they will support you. And Lord knows, I can think back so many people, and I can't begin to call their names, literally thousands of people who gave me money, who campaigned for me, who took me around, who took me in their homes, who had barbecues for me. I mean, people just reached out. And it wasn't because I was black, it was because they really believed that I could do the job and that I was qualified to do it, both on city council and when I ran for solicitor.
That is amazing to think about when you talk about that, Ralph, that first being elected to Conway City Council in a city that's thoroughly predominantly white.
Oh, absolutely.
In 1980, 81
Right.
time, and to think 15 years before that, when you were in high school,
Right.
that it was such a marked difference.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that is truly incredible. I hadn't thought about that. And of course, Jennifer talked about a lot similar to this growing up down in Walterboro
Right.
when she was with us on Monday. But at the same time, having not been elected to office so soon after having finished high school and not even being back in that area,
Right.
we weren't able to see that insight. That's incredible.
Oh, it is. It is. But the testament is really to the character of the people in the community. Because it shows that that is the community, that they can do what is right and that they believe in doing what is right. Because if they did not, certainly I could not have been elected.
Right.
Would not have happened.
That's right.
I'm always mindful of that, and I'm always grateful for that.
It's fascinating when you think about folks who have run, folks always talk about, and I'll just mention that, Jesse Helms, who ran
Right.
and had a very successful opponent in the early 90s, Harvey Gantt.
Right.
And, of course, Helms always won by these slim margins,
Right.
couple of points, but Gantt was no different than the very strong competitors that Helms had run against.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that again, what that shows, and Helms was just a strong candidate, no matter who ran against him, like Strom Thurmond here.
Right.
It wouldn't really matter who you put against him. I mean, he's usually going to come out on the winning side of it.
Right.
And Gantt, what I thought was a formidable candidate. He raised a ton of money, and that money came from from all segments of the community.
Oh,
it just didn't come from the black community. Same thing when I ran. It takes a lot of money to run a campaign. And that money has to come from all segments of the community. And you usually can tell how well you're doing by how much money you can raise. And each of my campaigns, I was able to raise a substantial amount of money, and in most of them, more than my opponents. And it made me feel good to know that people had that kind of confidence in me as a person, and that they didn't see color, they saw ability.
Right.
And that made all the difference in the world to me.
Oftentimes you'll hear about these millionaires running for office, but it's truly a testament if you can actually go ahead and raise even a semblance of that, even a scintilla of that, because it reflects a heck of a lot of folks willing to support you. Of course, a lot of people can just throw money into an election, but actually getting out and raising money is another thing.
Well, and people are real tight with their money. They don't want to give away their money, so they want to know before they give you money, one, that you can win, or at least that you have the ability to win, and two, that they agree with you, at least in principle, on your ideas. And I think that color has absolutely nothing to do with that.
Having been an assisted public defender for half a decade, a little more than half a decade, for 7 or 8 years, that experience of having been a public defender and then obviously getting into the other side, being a prosecutor, that was a pretty big shift there.
Well, actually, yes and no. I enjoyed when I was a public defender because you're doing something totally different. When you're a public defender, your job is to represent really those people who are charged with crimes, and when you're a prosecutor, your job is to prosecute those people, put them in jail if you can. But my feeling about it has always been my job is to do the right thing, and to represent whichever side I'm representing as best I know how. And because I do it that way, I don't get into a philosophical argument with myself about, okay, am I representing someone who's really a bad guy, or am I prosecuting someone who's really a good guy? That's not my decision. My job is to represent whichever side as best I know how, based on my ability and my understanding of the law. And that's what I've always tried to do. Now, I'll tell you this, it is different. When you're a public defender and you're representing people, usually you have very little support. You have no investigators, you have no staff to speak of, so it's pretty much you and the defendant. And that's a trying thing, and a lot of times it's an uphill fight. The prosecutor, being a prosecutor, on the other hand, is a much easier job. You got the police, you got SLED, you got all these law enforcement agencies that are supporting you, and you got a lot more resources and that you do not have. And so I enjoyed being a prosecutor a lot more because it was a lot easier to prosecute. And but the other side of being a prosecutor that I really enjoyed is to know that you're doing good for the community, that you're putting bad people away who need to be put away, people who do not need to be in society, who we can't live with because they are too mean-spirited, or they have no ability to live in society in peace and abide by the rules and regulations that we have. There are people who can't do that. And for a long time, I used to believe that there was really good in every person. I used to honestly believe that. Well, I don't know that I believe that anymore. I think that there are people who are just so bad that there is nothing we can do except to put those people in jail and leave them there for the rest of their lives, so that the rest of us can be safe. And as a public defender, I didn't believe that. It wasn't until I became a prosecutor that I actually got to see some of the horrendous acts that that defendants cause, that criminals can cause. And I can tell you specifically about a case that happened over in Socastee some years ago, and which is really the thing that changed my view about crime and about being a prosecutor versus being a public defender or even a defense lawyer. And that was that we had this case that this young fella, who was actually 19 years old, had gone to these people's house. He and his boss were driving out one day. It was hot. The truck stopped along the highway because they had a flat tire. And they walked over to this house, which was right across the street. There was this older lady who was in the yard hoeing some flowers or something. Her husband was an invalid, and he was in the bed and could not walk at all. And this young man, this lady invited him in, let him use the telephone to make phone calls. They made the calls. They went back. That night, he came back to her house about 3 a.m., kicked in the door, and assaulted the old lady, raped her. Then he went into the room where the older man was, and these people are in their late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, Lord.
And he went back into the house where the old man was, and the only thing the man asked him, and this is his story, the only thing the man said, please don't kill my wife. Please don't, kill her. Do whatever you want to do to me, but please don't hurt her. What does he do? He walks away. He goes into the kitchen. He gets a butcher knife. He comes back and he stabs the old man to death. Then he goes back into the room where he had just raped the woman, and then he kills her. And he's 19 years old. He steals their car, and then he drives off. And the thing was, his only reasoning was he wanted to go find his girlfriend who had left to go to Greenville. I mean, that was his reason for doing it.
That's why he wanted the car.
That's why he wanted the car. And even if he wanted the car, there was no reason to kill these people. It was night. They probably never could have identified him. The man certainly was no threat to him because he didn't get out of bed.
Right.
But it's that kind of thing that taught me that, there are people who are just so mean, who have no conscience, and we can't live with those people. And I was against the death penalty until that happened. And after that, it just changed my whole perspective. Because after that, I honestly believe that there are people who need to be put away, and even given the death penalty when it's appropriate.
But even still having those things, if you were still a public defender, how would you have represented him? I mean,
because my job is different.
Right.
As a public defender, my job is not to judge whether he's guilty or not guilty, and whether he did the act or didn't do it. My job is to give him a defense as best I know how within the law.
Within the law.
Within the law. And what that means is, do I lie for him? Do I cover for him? No. But what I do is, within the rules that are set by the court, that I go in and I defend him as best I know how. And that is what's required of us. In fact, we take an oath to do that.
Right.
Just like doctors take an oath in order to save lives, we take an oath in order to defend people. Whether or not they are guilty or not guilty is really not the issue.
Ralph, as the prosecutor for the counties, for Horry and Georgetown County, when you were in that position, were there as the solicitor, were there times where you sat there and thought, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and put on your public defender hat and think, if I was on that side, I'd be coming back at this Wilson like this? Did that ever happen?
No, actually, it's the other way around. What happened was, because I had had the experiences as a public defender, when I became a prosecutor, I always knew what the defense was going to do.
Sure.
I knew what they were thinking. I knew how to get around what they were thinking, and it really was a huge advantage. but now it's the same as I go back and I practice defense law. It's a huge advantage because now I know exactly what the prosecutor's thinking. I know what his weaknesses are. I know what his strengths are. I know how to undermine his case within the rules, and it's kind of like putting the fox in the hen house. I mean, now that you're back out, you know all the weaknesses. And it makes it very difficult for them to pull anything over you or get by with anything. So it allows you to protect your clients even more.
Have you thought about running for any other offices, Ralph?
Well, we have children. Jennifer and I have children who are at home. We have 2 at home. And because they're small right now, I really can't go away, and going to Columbia is just not an option, or even to Washington, because we have children, and that's our first priority and our first commitment is to take care of those children and to raise them. When they get older, maybe I'll consider something, but right now I'm happy just practicing law and raising my children.
Yeah, what's that like being a dad of 2 young girls, Ralph?
You know, it's really exciting. When my kids were born, my earlier kids were born, I was so busy working on my career and trying to move up in the world and you know, and trying to get out of law school, and it was really difficult. So I didn't really have the time to really fully enjoy and understand the role of a parent. Now it's so wonderful because I have the time, I have more of the resources, and I think I'm a much better father because of that, because I'm older and because I do understand the importance of raising children now. Not that I didn't understand the importance of it, I just didn't have the time.
Sure.
I mean, you know, I was busy trying to make a living and trying to get by, and now I enjoy my children. I enjoy spending time with them, doing things with them, and it's just the exciting part of our life right now.
And I'm sure, and obviously your girls are thrilled, and I'm sure you've probably had that talk with Kia and Ralph Jr. You know, I'm sorry I didn't have as much time as I have now.
Yeah, and it's strange. My daughter is practicing law here, and she's actually a public defender now.
Is that right?
She is. And my son is in law school. He's in his 3rd year in Michigan. So they're both in the law. Wow. When we come home, you know, they always say, "Well, Daddy, you never took us to Wendy's that often, you know, like you take Hannah and Rachel. You never took us to Walmart like you take them."
Right.
So it's real interesting to hear them talk about it. But it's all in fun because they really understand that it's very different now.
Oh yeah, very definitely. And your son, a 3L there at Michigan Law School, a top 10 law school. That must be a great feeling.
No, he's actually at Cooley in
in Michigan, excuse me, but still being in law school up in Michigan's exciting. Gives you an opportunity to get up there.
Yeah, and he was president of the Student Bar Association for his school this past year, so I was real proud of him for that.
Wow, yeah. Hopefully you'll be able to pull him back to Conway as well. That's right.
I got my fingers crossed.
How exciting! You know, before we started filming this morning, Ralph, we think about that aspect of some amazing cases that you were able to prosecute in the early 90s throughout, as well as some of the early experiences even before then. We talked about the Register case, and as well as a Rebecca Smith case, another very interesting case, as well as one that you argued on behalf of an Air Force base, a gentleman, I believe, in the state Supreme Court.
Yeah, Frank Sosebee. You know, my favorite case of all time is Rebecca Smith. Frank Sosebee's case was my most difficult case, and probably the case that I learned more about myself as a lawyer than any other case that I've ever handled. Register was different because it was the first DNA case ever in South Carolina. Right. And when you're a prosecutor, I think you're under a microscope because the public's always watching to see what's going on. But the story with Rebecca Smith, that was a case that I will never, ever forget. And the interesting thing was this was a man who was a good family man, who loved his wife and who had taken vacation to come down to Myrtle Beach to fish, and left his wife home. He had 2 weeks vacation and he wanted to spend 1 week of it here. He'd come down to North Myrtle Beach. While he was here, she and her boyfriend, that is his wife and her boyfriend, decided that they wanted to come and rob him because he'd gotten some extra pay from his job. And sure enough, they come down here. They've been drinking and smoking marijuana. They come down here. They go to the mobile home where he's living. And while they're there, she goes in to kind of settle him down and get him in the bed. The boyfriend stays outside. She goes inside. She gets him to sleep. Once he goes to sleep, then the boyfriend comes in, and then they take a baseball bat and just beat him to death. And take his ring, take his money, and then she goes back to North Carolina and pretends that she doesn't know anything about it. It was a real interesting case because they had a root doctor who was sprinkling dust, that she'd gone to the root doctor the next day to get some kind of dust to sprinkle so that the police wouldn't come to her house. Of course, the police did go to her house and she was arrested. But it was a case where she had absolutely no remorse. She had no remorse. She showed no remorse. And it was the first time in South Carolina in 50 years that we got the death penalty against a woman. She was the first woman in 50 years to get the death penalty. My understanding is the Supreme Court about 8 years later, 7 years later, reversed it and gave her a life sentence. So she's still serving a life sentence without parole.
Ralph, you're not going to believe it. We've got less than a minute, and I think time has flown. You know, someone said we should have gotten you in here for part 1 and part 2. And, of course, last Thursday and Friday, Dick Rosen was with us, and we're going to have to get you back.
I'd love to come
for
back.
another experience. And, of course, it was great kicking off the week with Jennifer. We've had an amazing week. But some of the experiences, and, of course, having been good friends with folks, oftentimes defending a case or prosecuting a case. We were talking about Tommy Britton earlier. With folks that you've known a long time, that must be very interesting.
A good friend of mine, Tommy and Morgan and I are good friends, and we'd been friends for years before we tried that case. But one of the things is we've tried a lot of cases over the years with Tommy and Morgan, and but we've remained friends. It doesn't come between us, and I've won most of them while I was a prosecutor. Of course, you know, once every now and then they'd get lucky and they'd win one. But it was a lot of fun, and they really made me work hard. You know, to do my job. So, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute as a prosecutor because I really thought that we were doing a good job for the community and helping.
Absolutely. Ralph, I hope you'll let us get you back for part 2 and maybe part 3 in the future. That'd be great.
All right. Thank you.
Stay tuned. More Carolina People with Ralph Wilson coming up next. Can you imagine the oldest of 9 children? Think about that. Even being anywhere in that mix. Oldest, youngest, right in the middle. The fascinating aspects of born in Horry County, raised in Horry County, leaving for about 7 years. We didn't even get to talk about Benedict College or the experiences in law school, but coming back and recognizing and to hear him talk about the other 8. And to know they're all here in the area, and the experiences, of course, this morning stealing them away from their ritual of getting together as a family still with his mother of 9. That's amazing. Think about that experience. First elected to Conway City Council in '84, re-elected in '88, and then to think of the experiences being elected solicitor for Horry and Georgetown County. You know, we think about some of those early upbringing effects that stick in your mind, and he talked about some of those. Not being able to go into certain areas or travel through certain parts of the county. But you recognize there's the important influences that set the stage for you to do a heck of a lot. Ralph Wilson's had that. We've had part 1. I don't think in the last 3 years we've had the experience of kicking off a week with somebody and then wrapping up the week with a spouse. We've done it this week on Carolina People. Tune in sometime soon for part 2.